Hi, good afternoon. My name is Monica Margaillan, and I am going to be interviewing Professor Rod Golden this afternoon. Um, Professor Rod Golden is a Mesa Community College faculty with 15 years of teaching experience in sociology, African-American studies, intro to sociology, sociology of sports, gender and society, race and ethnic groups, just to name a few. So we're going to be talking to Professor Rod Golden this afternoon regarding social justice. That is our topic for today. And I would like to welcome Professor Golden. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to interview you. My first question has always been, why did you choose this field?
Well, I was a rehabilitation major, and I had a friend who was taking a sociology class with a professor by the name of Dr. Dennis Rome, who was from the same hometown I'm from in Chicago. So I decided to take that class with her, and I liked the class, I liked the subject matter, and I liked the professor, who became one of my many mentors. And from that moment on, I was hooked. Me in my major during undergrad, I had some good instructors who several of became my mentors to that had a lot to do with my professor that I am today because of their teaching style, their belief in students, and they were really appreciative of me. And the most important thing is they believed in me. That's the most important thing. So in so many words, the major changed me, chose me, excuse me.
Thank you, Rod. What is your definition of social justice and what place does it have in education?
Opportunities, equal access to livelihood, equal access to just being and respected as a human being. That's the most important thing. And people respecting my humanity. How is it important in reference to education? Oh, that's a good question. And it is about the students. I believe in social justice that we need to allow our students to voice their opinion that is respective of other students' opinions. They have to be in a position where they can speak freely. They can be themselves without disrespecting anybody else based on their biological makeup. And so it's very important to me that students are in an environment that is created by the professor that's in the classroom. They have to be in an environment that is warm, welcoming, and in so many words, and Monica, you and I have had many conversations that I believe that students should know that their professor cares about them and has their best interests at heart. And sometimes you even have to tell students that you love them because you might be the first person that has ever told that student that they love, and you show them that you love them. So that's what social justice is to me. Believing in students, creating a positive and warm, loving environment. And if that environment is loving and warm, the students are hooked. You don't even have to worry about them not coming to class, because not only will they come to class, they will bring their family and friends to class with them, because they'll be talking about the environment that you've created as a professor to their family members and their friends and employees on their job, to the point where they might even motivate their employees or family members to go back to school, something that they have been trying to get them to do for years. And that might have something to do with you because the environment you created.
True. True. Now, you know that the topics that you teach, these are topics of sociology. But let's talk about race and ethnicity. Let's talk about gender and society. You know, when you are having those conversations in the classroom setting, Um, how do you struggle as far as if you have certain students that don't agree with you? Do you struggle with having a decent conversation with them as far as in order for it not to escalate? And the reason why I ask this is because it's sometimes it's very hard to have those kinds of conversations. Specifically with our younger students, we have students that have this passion, we have these students that have this driven of wanting to make a change in society nowadays. And how do you help them navigate those conversations?
That is very, very easy for me because I feel comfortable talking about those difficult conversations other people are unwilling to talk about. But it goes back to your previous question. If I've created a positive and welcoming environment, students know they're not going to be judged. If they know they're not going to be judged, they know they can speak freely. Look, I keep a box of Kleenex, 2 or 3 in the classroom, because we're going to be dealing with subjects that might make people shed tears. And they know that they're not going to be judged, so they can speak freely. And they have support by me, also with other students. Now, if there's students that disagree with me, that's fine. Sometimes I go in there ready to start an argument, okay? Because I want to play the devil's advocate. I want to see the other side. And I'll say this, Monica, one of my students asked me, Professor Gold, you never give your opinion. I said, yeah, my opinion are the facts. As long as I'm bringing truth, which is a 5-letter word, facts, which is a 5-letter word, think, which is a 5-letter word, because I want the students to think critically, and using logic, then I can show them that what they're told in the past is totally different than what I'm telling them, because I have the facts on my side. I have logic on my side. I'm making sense, which is a 5-letter word. And so it's very simple and it's very easy because the environment you create is comfortable, it's warm, it's welcoming. I can speak freely. I have students in my class that are supporters of the current occupant of the White House. They've even told me at the end of class, Professor, I didn't agree with everything you said, but you created an environment where I can speak freely. And that's the most important thing, and that's very important because it says a lot about the professor. If I can create a climate where everybody can speak and they know they're not going to be judged. You can cry and you know you're not going to be judged. You can argue with me, and I want you to, because the one thing that we can do as educators is we can learn from our students. And they appreciate that too.
But you fortunately enough have created that environment within your own classroom. We know that we don't live in that environment outside of that classroom.
It's true.
We know that our current climate, our current situation, our everything that's currently happening in our society right now is not like that. It's not respecting each other's opinion. It's whether I'm right, you're wrong, whether it is I'm blue, you're red, whether it is, those are the current climate that we're living in right now. So how do you help this younger generation to learn from our history? Because this is a thing, this is not the first time. This is not the first time, I'm so sorry. This is not the, keep me on.
Okay.
This is not the first time that we've gone through this. This is not new to a lot of us. So how do we teach our younger generation to not have history repeat itself?
What we do is, and it goes, because all of the questions are connected, and teaching history, I always tell students, why do you hate history? They say, because it's boring. I say, hold on, you're making history as you're living it. What you do is you try to connect the past with the future. And sometimes you have to show them things that happened 50, 60 years ago so they can see the relevance to what's going on today. And so what I always like to do is I'll take a particular year, it could be 1965, and I'll use August 6th. What's significant about that day? The Voting Rights Act was signed. Fast forward 49 years, and they gutted Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act. It impacts everybody. So what you do is you show them that there's a connection, an event that happened here and make it relevant today. Now, because they had videos, you could also show them videos of those events that happened 50, 60 years ago. Now, what do? Talking about something that happened in 1865. Well, you could talk about something that happened in 1865 and bring it 98 years later, because there was assassination of a president in 1865, and there was assassination of a president in 1963. Connection? Both of them were Democrats. No, one was a Republican, one was a Democrat. Okay, but the point is, you can always make them connections, but also you can fast forward 16 years after 1865, 20 years after 1881, 1901, and then 32 years that they were all either assassinations or attempted assassinations. So you can sit back here and make those connections with the past. You can show them what's going on in the present and also start thinking about the future. I'm already talking about 2030. What conversations are we going to have in 2030? And so once you make that relevant, it garners their attention, because they can say, wait a minute, this happened years ago. I give you an example, Monica. In 1963, you had the dogs and water hoses on the protesters in Birmingham, Alabama. Fast forward to 2016, you had Standing Rock, Sioux Nation. You had water cannons, dogs, and water hoses against the water protectors that were trying to protest. They were protesting against the Dakota Access Pipeline to send oil through that was going to damage the water system up there. This law enforcement used the same tactics. So what I did was I showed them that occurred Labor Day weekend in 2016. I said, now you're going to have an assignment on, and I didn't tell them what it was. You're going to have an assignment on the 15th of September, Thursday. So I showed them that assignment. A couple of the questions I had, what's the similarities of what 1963 to 2016? So once they see the similarities, then they're connected, they're hooked. So when they hear something, well, this is your John Kennedy. We're talking about the assassination of President Kennedy. We're talking about the events that happened on September 11, 2001. I was told this is your John Kennedy because I wasn't born during that time. But what they were telling me was that the nation was in a state of flux because we had just lost the president, okay, and then the alleged assassin was assassinated on live television. Fast forward 38 years later, you have the events on September 11th, where we saw on live television planes going into the World Trade Center. If you didn't see it live, they had the video showing it to you. So you were traumatized by both events 38 years later. Now, people that were around during that time, they can always share those stories with the younger heads. So always tell the students, once they leave class, make sure you talk to the older heads, because you're trying to get to where they at. And you also learn how to navigate through this. I was thinking about what we're doing right now 5 minutes before we came on the air. And I said to myself, I remember telling the students in 2016 before November 8th, when Mrs. Clinton and Mr. Trump people were going to go out and vote. And I said to my students in October or September, this is going to be y'all Watergate. I told them this is going to be y'all Watergate, because you guys weren't around in 1973, 74. Okay, but you're going to see what all the other older heads went through, and those of us that were in elementary school went through during this time. You're going to see this, and then you can understand what you see now. And that's why I mentioned 2030. You're going to be able to tell these stories, what happened in 2020. To the people that are on this earth now, they like 3 or 4, but they're going to be 14. They're going to be 13. Some of them that were 6 and 7 going to be 8, 17, 18. You see what I'm saying? So they're going to ask you questions.
So let me ask you.
Yes, ma'am.
Is history repeating itself?
Is history repeating itself? Yes. And see, when you start looking at everything has a sequence. So everything is every year is 11 years. So 11 years from now, the dates that are now are going to be the same. So today is October 9th, Friday. If you look at 2031, it's going to be October 9th. It's going to be a Friday. I'm pretty sure if it's the 30, if it's not, yeah, it's gonna be the 31st. So I don't have my phone with me, but I'm just saying, because I look at things like that way, and I start thinking it, because even if I wasn't around at that time, I started thinking about what the world was like, so I could make it relevant to the students. How are you gonna teach this so it could be relevant? So when you hear something, Monica, and they say, this is the first time, no, it's not. Let me correct you. This is what happened on this day, at this time. Make it relevant.
Let me ask you then, for this now young generation, social media.
Oh yeah.
You know, we didn't have social media in the 60s. Well, I wasn't born in the 60s, but there was no social media in the 60s. There was no social media in, so there was not a lot of footage. I mean, there was, but not comparing to today, where anybody now can raise a phone and record things.
That's true.
And put them on social media for people to access. Now, how does that impact our young generation, whether it's in a positive or a negative way?
Good question. The one thing about recording, you can record history. However, at the same time, it impacts the young people in a negative way, because sometimes that's where they only get their news through social media. And a lot of times the information that's put on social media could be inaccurate. So that's why when in the classroom, when students write term papers for me, I always tell them, you have to have at least 3 sources. They say 3. I said, yeah. I said, when I was doing my graduate work, I needed 20, 25. I wrote papers 50. When you do a dissertation, a thesis, you're talking about 50, 60 sources. You got 5 pages of sources. So I'm asking you for 3, because that way it confirms your arguments, your theories, and how and your opinions. And so that's why I always say that. So that's the negative side of social media, because you don't know if the information is accurate. But the positive is you can record history. And I'll say this, a positive of social media is the Michael Brown situation, because the corporate media did not want to cover that story. It was social media that put that information out. Corporate media had no choice. So I'm not into social media. I am on Facebook, but I'm not into Twitter or Snapchat or Instagram. I'm not any of that, TikTok, anything, because I always believe in looking at independent media, because independent media is not not by corporations or advertising. And independent will cover a story 2 to 3 days before corporate media. Independent media will cover, where corporate media might spend 30 seconds on it, 3 minutes on it. So make sure you find other sources on a story, because I want to hear what other sources are saying about the same story. Now, what's interesting to know is sometimes when you check 3, all of them saying the same thing, so I might have to go to another source, because I want more information. So
now, with what currently is happening with Black Lives Matter, what's currently happening with riots and unfortunately riots and protests, what do you recommend our young generation, what is important for them to get involved in? How do you see them having a voice in all of this? It's easy for them just to go to a protest, but I'm asking you, is there any other ways to do business? Is there any other ways that they can have a voice? How do you help your students to have a voice?
First of all, use the voice in the classroom. Going back to your previous question with social media, they can go on social media, connect with other people that have shared values, share opinions. They can be members of their family, because there's always going to be people that are going to try to shut you down because they disagree with you. If you are relevant, you want people to disagree with you. That's important. So you use the platform that you have. You can use, because you're not going to have people that are going to use their voice. Their voice might be, Monica, their pen, like Ida B. Wells. She wrote about lynching by using her pen, okay, to reach a larger audience. A poet, Langston Hughes, used his pen to reach a larger audience, to talk in poetry, to talk about the struggle of Black people, okay? And poets do. You have people who are artists, like Tupac Shakur, who used his because he was a poet, he was Shakespearean, but he used his voice to educate the young people, educate the mass, but also educate the older people, because a lot of people understand Tupac is intergenerational. See, there are older heads that were older than him that I teach about Tupac. Okay, I teach a young audience, but my young audience is aware of Tupac. But how I approach it is I try to explain to them that he wrote poetry before he started using his voice in rap, because all rap is poetry in the spoken word. So they can do it in many ways. They could use it as a writer. They could use it as an artist, musical artist. They could use it in the classroom. They can join different organizations. And also use social media by connecting. Now, you mentioned the 1960s and the 50s, through the civil rights movement, the anti-war movement, they didn't have social media. So it was, a lot of times it was shoe leather, going door to door. There was phone calls. The phone, when you sit back here, you stick your finger in there, you dial it, yeah. And then take some, but that Western Union, Lord Jesus. I'm just telling you, this is what people did. You know, to send money. Okay, you couldn't send a text message, or you couldn't use a cell phone. So yeah, that's what people did. They did whatever it took to use communication. And the thing, and I'm going back to independent radio, because I've listened to some of Dr. King's radio interviews on independent radio stations. And he's telling the people that independent radio is so important, because you're reaching a larger audience, because everybody can't be home to watch television. That's why with technology, you use what you can, because now you can you look at your phone and you can find out what's going on. And then you can also check other sources, because I always say, let me make sure, a prime example, and you should talk about history. January 26th, I always ask students, what happened on that day? It was a Sunday. My students are intellectuals. That's what I refer to them as, intellectuals. Let's say that's the day Kobe Bryant got killed. I remember that day as if it was yesterday, because I didn't want to believe it. So my student called, my girls called me, and I said, are you sure? And they said, I'm pretty sure. I said, look, I want you to check other sources. Like, we in class. I'm like, I need you to check, because I haven't seen it on television. That was me being optimistic, because I checked weather in different cities, and Los Angeles is one of them, spending time there. And I knew it was cloudy that day. So I still didn't. Once the phone calls started coming, and that's the whole thing about social media, getting news in a millisecond, checking the television, you're like all these different avenues of information. That's what it is.
So you basically are telling them to get informed.
Yes.
Get informed, get the knowledge before they decide to do anything. And then there's several ways of having a voice. It doesn't have to be just one path.
Right, yeah, do your research, because every organization might not be for you. And see, Monica, a lot of times people might go out on their own because they're being stifled by an organization. And they might start up, you know, we think about the events that happened in history. A lot of times people could stifle you because they might be jealous of you, because you might be smarter than the leader. You might not like the direction that the leadership is going. So you want to do your own thing. But that's why I always tell them, do your research. Find out what organization is going to be good for you. You might be great being solo. You might be able to get your message out in other ways, through the classroom. Now you got this different technology. You could go use Red Talks. You can do YouTube. But people, the key is this: getting your voice out. Somebody has to believe in you. Going back to my opening statement about me, somebody has to believe in you. In order for them to believe in you, they have to listen to you. And they have to understand the message that you're trying to convey to them. And if they believe in you, they're going to invest in you. And it don't have to be everybody that share your DNA. It could be somebody that don't look like you, that believes in you, that's listen to you.
And that's a perfect segment to my next question. How does an unlikely ally look like?
The unlikely ally can look like anybody that looks different than you. It could be somebody that, if you are classified as Black in America, it can be somebody that's Latinx. That's a good question, Monica, because the person I mentioned to you, my professor, I told you Dr. Rome, who happens to be Black African American, but Dr. Norma Sheplack, she's gay white female. She believed in me. Okay, Dr. David Ornstein is Jewish. Okay, and one of my mentors, I'm trying to get her here now next year. In fact, we have I'm gonna be meeting with Jackie Starks at the district and Dr. Felton, Dr. Karen Townsend, who is my mentor, and she's very direct. She's still very direct with me to this day when I talk to her. In fact, she told me a couple of years ago, get me down there. That's how she talks to me, because she's about business and she's a diversity consultant. Okay, that's what she does. Plus, also, she's I know that the ladies down here would benefit from her, because she's the type of person that motivates women, and she's about speaking for the unspoken and giving voice to the hopeless. So those individuals, all of them, except Dr. Rome, because we have, but wait a minute, with Dr. Rome, even though he's and I'm from the same town, he's a different generation. So every person I mentioned, Lou Shoup was the chair of the communications department. He talks about furthering my education. Oh, he's a gay white male. So the people that I'm mentioning all are different. They're either women, they're members of the LGBTQ community, or they're from different ethnicities. So those are allies that have helped me through the struggle. And I have plenty others as well. And I could not, and this is important, not do these focus groups at Mesa the years, because I have to have a department in the cultural sciences department that gives me the opportunity, that Dawn Zimmer, who promotes her and Laura Lassiter, who I can just pick up the phone or send an email, Dawn, I need you. When you want, first thing when you want to meet, I say, I want Laura there too. And we can sit down, chop it up for 2 hours. I can tell them, look, this is what I want to do. And it's settled. I mean, how are we going to promote it? This is what we can do. So I have a lot of unlikely allies, and all of them are different. But like I mentioned, the cultural sciences department and the social sciences department, that's Annalisa Alvarez and Paul Heider. But then my colleagues from Dr. Chavez and to Dr. Mona, Paul Rasha, and several other people within the department, and some of the ladies who teach geography from Ann Sappho and Nicole and KB. So I have so many different people that have been supportive of me. And I want to say something about education. Tawn, I've been knowing Tawn for 15 years. And Beth Allison, who attended my focus group, but also Beth, I can call her or send her an email and say, I need you to come to my class because I'm going to be talking about education. She said, I'm there. I might only be able to spend 20 minutes, but I'm coming to provide input just so they can help the intellectuals. So I just wanted to give you an idea of what type of unlikely allies, because everybody I mentioned is different than me, either different generation, different ethnic, different religion.
So again, I bring back to the unrest social unrest that we're currently experiencing in the United States.
Yes.
And we hear about fake news, we hear about left and right, we hear about you're not the same as me, you don't look the same as me, and there's a lot of unrest. And our young generation are looking at all of this and
Right.
not understanding what's going on and why adults, unfortunately, are acting this way. So by you saying unlikely allies, that means that you don't have to look the same in order for you to be able to support each other. And it's not what's going on right now is not the norm. Is it easy for me to say that? Is it fair for me to say that?
That is not the norm. We're living in some very, very strange times. And this what we're going through has always been under the surface. I've been talking about this for years. However, when people feel, I have a theory that I talk about in sociology and African-American studies, it don't apply to me theory. And a lot of people feel that if it doesn't apply to me, if it doesn't affect my bank account, if it doesn't affect my area, then I don't worry about it. Well, that's what, now it's knocking at your door. Because see, you got children, and your children have friends who are different than you. Because this generation, the Z generation and the millennials, they are in a society where their friends are diverse. And so they see their friends going through struggles, and they're very upset about it. And when we have parents who don't want to talk to their children about what's really going on, that's where you have the conflict. We're dealing with times now, Monica, where we have family members that have not spoken to each other since 2015. We have parents that have not spoken to their children since 2015 because of the current political climate. And what we're going to need in order for this to move forward, it's going to take about 10 to 15 years for this, and I'll say this, and I'll tell you why. Because you need people that are going to be willing, they have to be willing to sit down and listen to both sides. And you might need, it's like a contract negotiation. You might need an outside arbitrator. And what I mean by that is somebody that is respected by both sides of the issue to come in and get these two parties together, because they're not going to be able to do this on their own, because there's so much negativity that has occurred over this last 5-year period. And so the young people are going to be the ones that are going to be able to bring people together, because they're dealing with it, they're living it. This is their generation. They've had to deal with the stock market situation, the housing situation in 2008. They had to deal with COVID. They didn't even graduate like normal. Okay. So it's going to take a lot of work. It's going to take a lot of listening, not talking. It's going to take a lot of listening. It's going to take a lot of tears. It's going to take a lot of patience. And it's going to take a lot of years that's why I keep bringing up 2030 for a reason, because it's not going to happen next year. It's not going to happen 2-3 years. It's going to take time. And we have to be patient. We live in the microwave generation. We want things to happen quick. It's not going to happen that way. It's going to take a lot of time.
But the only ones that will actually make an impact, or it can make the change, would be this young generation.
That's right.
I mean,
because
we can put the path, lead the way, but eventually in 2030, I don't know if I'm going to still be here. We're looking at 50 years from now. That will make me 100. but I'm just saying, this new generation is the only one can impact and make change in what we're currently experiencing. And if what I've seen is, I've seen a lot of young students being activists, a lot of young students actually finding their voice and speaking out.
Yep.
A lot of young students actually being brave enough to speak. So I am very optimistic that this new generation is actually going to be able to impact. But the reason why I bring back history is because they need to learn their history in order for them to be able to make a difference and make a change.
That's right. That's correct. That's correct. They have to know history. I'm a huge proponent of that, is knowing the history. And, you know, I heard the late Coach John Thompson, who just made the transition September 2nd of this year, and he was asked about being the first Black coach to win an NCAA title, and it was in 1984. He said he was insulted, and he said he took a lot of flack from that. And he said, well, the reason why he said that is because there were so many others who never got the opportunity to be in a position to win the championship. So, Monica, and that's why it's very important, because you talk about history. If we're still talking about the first in 2020, that's a problem.
Yes.
That is a problem. Because when President Obama became president, he was at the inaugural, and everybody was asking these questions. This is, America should be proud of itself. And I said, no, America should be assaulted. They said, why? I said, because if it took till 2008 for this to happen, that's a problem, because all those other people who never got the opportunity, who were denied because of race, because of gender, that's an issue. And it says, and it's an indictment on us that we are not as progressive as we profess. And something else, when the people say they're progressive, what are you progressing from? Nobody ever asked that question. So what are you progressing from? And so what we have to understand is, first, okay, if it's 75 years ago, okay. But when you're talking about now, okay, well, why didn't you? And you mentioned something about history, and I was thinking, and you were talking about the footage and stuff that was footage, but it really wasn't social media. If you go back and look at those newsreels, and I mentioned 1963, you'll notice something. All you see is white males covering the news. Hold on, stop for a moment. They're the only people that can cover the news? You have to ask that question. And then as it became diversified, okay, you see Black males. But I said, wait a minute. So they're the only people that can cover the news? Where the Latinx people? They ain't around. There was no people around. Where the women at? They can't do the news? And so history is important. So I made my students do, I said, anybody familiar with Michelle Clark? They're looking around, never heard of her. I said, why don't you Google her? She's no longer with us. She was killed in 1972. In December 1972, she was killed in a plane crash. She was a rising star in media. And I think her and my mother grew up together, because my mother's from Gary, Indiana. They grew up together. The point I'm trying to make is, there were many people who were like Michelle Clark. Jessica Savage was another one, was killed in a car accident in 82. There were other people, but they died young. There should be people pipeline coming right behind them. When you start looking around media and you start looking around different avenues, you got to begin to ask yourself, what's going on? I was telling students yesterday about a lady named Beth Mowens. She's been doing football for years. 2 years ago, she became the first woman to do play-by-play for the NFL. The social media went crazy because they felt that she was not authorized. She didn't have the credentials to do NFL football. Hold on, bro. This woman's done college football for decades. You're going to tell me that she does not only football, she does basketball. You're going to tell me she can't do NFL? Only difference is one is amateur, other one's professional. But what we do, and you asked me a question about social justice. It's about opportunity, fairness, equality. But when you don't get the opportunity, how do we know how smart you are? We don't.
And we're in 2020.
Yes.
And we have right now 2 people that are running to be our next leaders.
Yeah.
And these 2 individuals look exactly the same.
Mm-hmm.
They have almost the same age. I mean, one is probably more progressive than the other, but again, you don't see a lot of color.
Nope.
And that's what our students are looking at, and they reach the point: is it even worth me saying something? Is it worth me even speaking and showing how I feel? And that leads to my next question: what is the term "silence as betrayal" mean to you?
Well, I have an assignment in class, a presentation called the Silence is Betrayal presentation. And the reason why I use that statement is because that was the statement, that was the speech that Dr. King gave April 4th, 1967, Riverside Church, New York City, 7 o'clock in the evening, beyond Vietnam. And he felt that if he stayed silent against the Vietnam War, he would be betraying everybody who was going over to Vietnam, and they were coming back either in body bags, dismembered, mentally disturbed. Their lives were different. And he felt that that was an unjust war. And it was the young people, Monica, who pushed him to speak out against that war. It was the boomer generation. That's what part of the story that people don't talk about. And so that's my favorite one, because basically that's the speech that got him killed. And if you look at, fast forward 65 days later, April 4th, 1968, Thursday, he was killed at the same time, on the same day, at the same hour, when he gave the speech the year before. And so I feel, and I allow the students, they select the topics that they want to speak on. And they select something that they feel that people have been silent about for so long. And so when people are silent, they're part of the problem. Now, silence is golden. In some cases, it is, because you want to listen. That's okay. But a lot of times, because people have been silent so long, that's the reason why you got the current environment that you have today. Because of silence. Because silence is complicity. I say it about rape culture. I say it about racism. I say it about sexism. I say it about gender discrimination. I say it about anything. And people are silent. That's the problem. So when you stay silent, you're betraying someone. Because if you would have spoke up, and I've heard many people say this about people who are rape survivors, because they stay silent, another woman or another male was raped by a predator. And if I would have said something, I could have stopped it.
I would like to complete this interview with just a final thoughts from you when it comes to these students. You know, this event, the Black Brown College Bound, is targeting senior high school students and college transfer students. So what are your final thoughts to them when it comes to social justice and when it comes to finding their voice, especially during this time?
Well, my final thoughts are students must find their voice. They must find it on their terms. They must find it in their time. Nobody is going to, don't allow anybody to force you to speak until you're ready. You don't know when you're going to find your voice. I have had many students who, when they first enter my class, and because, Monica, my classes are videotaped a lot, one of my students, I remember when she first came to me, she was brought to me by Mr. Bennett, who's no longer at our college. He's at the district, Miss Thomas, Lyric Thomas. And when she came, she was very docile, would never speak. And if she would raise her hand very timidly. And I just happened to see it, and I would call on her. As years have gone on, because she'll be 22 next in February, she is not only have found her voice, she's participated in some of the protest rallies. Her and I have been to protest rallies together for the murder of George Floyd and all the injustice that's going on this year and over the years. So I've seen this young lady grow. I've seen other students who have started with me. They found their voice because, going back to your first question about the social justice, it's about a fairness, opportunity. You also have to have the opportunity to speak. And they're in an environment where they can speak and they're not going to be judged. So you find your voice on your terms. Don't allow anybody to force you when it's time for you to speak. You find on your terms, and it's going to be when you're ready. It's not going to be when somebody else is trying to push you there. And it might be something that has happened in the past. You stayed silent for so long, and finally, you said it's time. That's what it's about.
Well said. Well, I thank you for taking the time to have a little conversation with me on this important topic. And I just really appreciate your wisdom and expertise in this field. And again, thank you so much for allowing me to have spent this time with you.
Thank you. I appreciate it.